not all IFJs feel this way, but some IFJs might say like, I can barely do what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. What are you talking about? How am I supposed to even do that? Right. That would be the kind of the question from somebody maybe wired that way.
Well, and I think, it's not word for word, but I think we've actually received that feedback from IFJ types. And we're like, Absolutely. You're nuts. I'm not doing any more of this.
Yeah. Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So this is part 2 of a 2-part series episode structure. I don't know, but it's part 2. We're talking about personality types and self-parenting. Mm-hmm. And in part 1, the last episode, we laid down a lot of groundwork. Like the entire episode was laying down the tracks of what it means to be a good parent. How do people, or what are some frameworks that people can approach parenting with? Different qualitative things. So let's try to do a real quick, Antonia, like 5 minutes or less catch up. I mean, you need to go listen to that entire episode to know all of what we're going to do on this episode, because today we want to take what we talked about on the last show and apply it toward personality types specifically. Not every single one of the 16 types, but a framework, a pattern that you can take and apply to your own life in how to self-parent. But before we do that, you got to get caught up to what we did last week. So we'll do a brief catch up, but you really need to go listen to all of the show to get all the details and the nuance of what we spoke about.
So a quick encapsulation of the last episode was this idea that we have certain archetypal energies inside of us that have different agendas. We have an eternal child part of us that is seeking others to parent us for us, meaning that we show up to the world kind of hoping other people will be responsible for us and our outcomes.
Yeah.
And then we also have a parental aspect of ourselves that is willing to be the responsible party and to do that work and show up. There is a natural tendency to point that parental energy out, and we'll talk about why that is in this episode. But we have a tendency to kind of want to be parented by others, but at the same time do parenting for others.
Yes.
And so we have to change that dynamic around to start self-parenting. And so what we did is we laid the groundwork of why it's so important to understand why we need to self-parent, what kind of parent we are. We talked about being either a protective parent or a parent that tries to prepare their child, or one that tries to promote them into the world. And we laid the tracks of like, what kind of parent and do you have a tendency to be? Are you one of the ones that tends to protect, to prepare, or to promote?
Yeah.
And that they're all appropriate for our actual children. They're all appropriate at different phases of their life. But when we start to self-parent, what phase are we in? And what do we need to be doing for our different parts?
Yeah.
And then we talked about what might create some reluctance to do inner parenting work or to self-parent, but how crucial and important it is.
Yeah.
So those are basically the tracks we laid in the previous episode.
So we left you with 2 questions at the end of that episode. The one was to ask yourself, where am I outsourcing parenting? Where am I still looking to the outer world or outer energies to be the parental energy in my life? It might be your actual real parents if you're young, or maybe if you're old as well, or older, like we tend to do that as people. Is it your partner or spouse? Is it your job? Or is it an institution, a social cause, a religion, God, your own children? Like, where do you tend to hope you get saved or parented from the outside world is the first question we ask, because that's going to really help you today as we go through some of the specifics here and land toward personality type. If you have that kind of in your head, it's going to give you a better framework. And then we talked about, where do you tend to, when you bring parental energy to the world and you tend to, quote, parent people out here, what does that qualitatively look like? What does it feel like? What does it look like? Can you notice the qualities of that when you do it? Who you typically will attempt to parent? Because if you can see that and you're doing it toward other people, not just your own real children, but maybe there's people at work or your partner, or you're trying to parent, well, that might be an on-road for you to see how you're using it now to turn it toward the self. So we left you those 2 questions. Hopefully you were able to tune into the car model of your personality. So there's one for all the 16 types, just takes that 4-letter code and breaks it into a framework to see what's called the cognitive functions of your mind, how you learn information or gather or perceive your world, and how you make decisions or judge that information. It just gives a glimpse into that, the car model that comes from our personality owner's manuals at Personality Hacker. And so I recommended on the last show as well to go and get one of those owner's manuals for your personality type. It's going to be really helpful as you follow along today in triangulating these different energies and parts of you.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason why the car model is so important in the conversation that we're going to have in today's podcast
Yeah.
is that there's already a part of ourselves that tends to align with parental energy just by nature of our personality type.
Yeah.
So if you look at the car model, you've got we have already kind of put them in sort of quote unquote archetypal energies. We've got a driver, a co-pilot, a 10-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And so I'm going to assume you did what Joel mentioned, which is you have your car model in front of you for your personality type. And I'm going to look at all of these positions aligned with a different set of archetypal energies. So the technical names for all 4 of these positions are dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, and inferior. So dominant is driver, auxiliary is co-pilot, tertiary is 10-year-old, and inferior is 3-year-old. And so I want to take that dominant through inferior, what's called a cognitive function stack, and I'm going to align them with different archetypal energies. So this comes from our friend and mentor, Dr. John Beebe. You might be familiar with his 8-function model. If you want a deep dive into it, we've done multiple podcasts on the subject of John's archetypal, 8-function model. And then I would also recommend going and checking out John's work itself. John Beebe, the last name is Beebe. He's been a Jungian analyst for decades and decades and decades, part of the Jungian Institute of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And he has some pretty brilliant things to say on the topic.
Yeah. Or you can cut through, please go do that. You can cut through all the BS, join our Personality Life Path Mentorship Program. In 8 weeks, we'll go through each one of these over 8 weeks. We end with a live event. You can cut through all the clutter, all the nonsense and theory, and get right to the practical application of changing your life immediately.
Right. Yeah. So John has some essays, papers, books on it, which are all fabulous. And he comes from a psychoanalyst perspective.
Yeah.
What Joel's mentioning is a program that we have created in order to have it become practical.
Yeah.
And so the Personality Life Path program takes the 8-function model and turns it practical in your personal life.
Which you will understand everything John wrote if you do that first.
Yeah.
Like basically go learn after you do. That's what I'm trying to say is you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, the best element by connecting this in a real operational way in your life. Then go study all the material because then you'll have a place to apply it and have it come alive for you.
Yeah, and we created the program while coaching with John, and I had him give me a green light on everything.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty good program. So anyway, all of that said, I want to take the first 4 functions, the functions that you find in your car model, not the whole 8 functions, not the what's called shadow functions, just what's called, and Joel mentioned this in last podcast, what's called ego-syntonic functions.
Yeah.
And ego-syntonic means the cognitive functions or the mental processes that you identify with yourself, meaning that when somebody describes these things or like areas or arenas or gives you a good description of any of these functions, you go, oh yeah, that's me, right? You personally identify with them. The 4 functions that are not in your car model, what are called your shadow functions, they're called ego dystonic, meaning that when you get a good description of them, you immediately go, oh, that's somebody in my life. That's somebody else. Maybe, oh, that's more like my mom, or that's more like my, my brother, or that's more like my partner or my boss or whatever. So we're just going to talk about the 4 that are ego syntonic. And I want to hone in on the archetypes that are associated with the 2nd and 3rd function. So if you take functions 1 through 4, there is a specific archetypal energy that is associated with those first 4 functions. And what I mean when I say that they're associated is that these archetypes live inside of us regardless of the function that it is, regardless of our personality type. But the functions in the order that they are stacked depending upon our type.
Yeah.
John has noticed that we tend to have a relationship between a certain archetypal energy and that function position, or that function in that position, meaning that that they tend to go together. They don't have to. You can have these archetypal energies not associated with those functions, and you can use those functions not in association with those archetypal energies, but they tend to have a relationship with each other.
Yeah.
So just as a quick overview, and again, you can listen to entire podcast episodes on this. The first function, what we call the driver function, is associated with the archetypal energy of a hero, meaning that when we use this function, It's sort of the tool for all the jobs. We assume that we're going to be heroic when we use it. We assume that people are going to appreciate our efforts, and we feel a sense of confidence that one would imagine a hero feels, which is I expect this to work out. I expect me to come and save the day with this function. So that first function, that driver, tends to carry with it a heroic energy. And a hero is an archetype. If you see a picture of a hero, an image of a hero, you don't have to explain what that is. Most of us know what that we can tell. Like, we just see an image of Superman and nobody has to explain it. The cape tells us everything we need to know. The second function, the one that in our car model we call the co-pilot, is associated with the archetype of a parent. Now, so this is where it becomes relevant to our topic today. So we can have parental energy separate of that function, and we can use that function separate of parental energy, but they have a relationship with each other. And we're going to go further into that relationship in this episode. When you get to the 10-year-old function in our car model, or what's called the tertiary, this is aligned, unsurprisingly, with eternal child energy. So the eternal child part of us has a tendency to be associated with that function, that cognitive function. And then finally, in the car model, we talk about a 3-year-old. Its technical name is inferior. The archetypal energy associated with this is called your anima or your animus, depending upon the gender that you identify with. So I just want to hone in. There's lots to be said about all of this. What I just mentioned in about 90 to 120 seconds is like a lifetime of self-knowledge, understanding, awareness, tons of growth work, tons of even theoretical information. So we're not going to go way down that rabbit's hole. I just want to give this overview so we can zoom in particularly on the second and the third function, or the functions that carry with them the archetypal energy of a parent and the archetypal energy of an eternal child. And actually more, we're going to hone in on the parental energy and maybe make a nod to the eternal child energy, just acknowledging that this is the part of us that might end up, creating friction for us to get into the parental part.
Here's the thing. All of us have a overactive eternal child energy. I mean, in our profiler training program, one of the things we spend a lot of time working on is trying to notice when this part of somebody, when you're in a profiling session, you're sitting across them in a conversation, helping them arrive at a best fit type, this eternal child energy is so proving and often so hyperactive and wants to show itself. Even if it's introverted, it's still prominent in a person's life that sometimes it's hard to see beyond it. It's what we often as people present to the world as us. And so part of in profiler training as an example, to push that aside and look past it into the full personality and see all the other parts that are presenting themselves. Yeah.
One of the early mistakes that profilers make, a very common early mistake, is to believe that the 10-year-old or tertiary function is the dominant or driver because of how much we have a tendency to put it forward and almost brag about it.
Yeah. And then people that don't understand Jungian concepts or how any of this works sometimes actually will take that over hyperactive presentation and they'll apply a type, like a personality type to this dynamic that's happening and actually say, this is a type of person. They're actually wired this way. This isn't a hyperactive eternal child part of them that's just displaying itself or showing up improperly. No, this is a type of person. This is actually how it's supposed to be. And so sometimes categories can be created out of this as well, but it's somebody that doesn't understand fundamentally Jungian concepts, Jungian theory. They don't understand that the assemblage of these cognitive functions are what make up your preferences of type. You are not your type. And so to nominalize a display of this eternal child energy is also inappropriate and doesn't usually help us very much. It's a way to try to describe or identify it, but it just breaks down very quick when you calcify or nominalize it that way.
Well, I think what you're saying is that if a person thinks that they're like hyper focusing on the 10-year-old energy is a distinct maybe subtype, as opposed to a developmental timeline, like a moment on the developmental timeline. Sometimes it can discourage them from doing the work we're going to talk about today.
Exactly.
Which is getting into the more parental energy and self-parenting, because I think almost all of us have we have a fondness for our 10-year-old or tertiary function. We like the eternal child part of us.
Absolutely.
There's a ton of reasons why, But we, like it's actually a part that beautifies us. And, in theory language, if you look at the attitude or the introverted or extroverted direction of the driver or dominant, or what we're calling the hero in this episode, it matches the same as that eternal child or that 10-year-old or tertiary function. And so, of course, it's going to be something that we like because it helps us stay in our preferred world. If we're extroverted, it keeps us extroverted. If we're introverted, it allows us to stay introverted. Whereas the co-pilot auxiliary, or what we're talking about as a parental function in this episode, that forces us into the attitude that we don't like as much.
That's right.
If we're an extrovert, then our co-pilot or parental function is introverted. And if we are an introvert, it is extroverted. So it forces maturity out of us. It forces us to explore a different world, which is, again, why it's associated with parental energy, because it doesn't just tell us what we want to hear. It doesn't allow us to, to engage with the world in a more childlike way where we force the world to meet us all the way where we're at. It forces us to meet the world halfway. It forces us to see different, maybe less owned parts of ourselves. And so as a parental, as a function that carries parental energy, it by definition encourages us to grow. And that's why it's so crucial and important. So having the episode we talked about before, like in the first episode where we laid the tracks of why it's so important to do self-parenting, how it actually makes us happier, more fulfilled people if we take on the role of parental energy for ourselves. And then looking at the map of archetypes represented in our function stack, or you can also say the car model, it gives us waypoints. It gives us a map for how to start self-parenting, or at least an on-ramp for it. And I think what's nice about using this model is that if you're already into type, you already have a good solid description of what that co-pilot or auxiliary function does. So it gives you a little bit of, it gives you some, like a cookie crumb trail to get to parenting for the self. Now, John also says, and I'm just going to mention this is not as crucial, but it is interesting in terms of this conversation. He says that the first and fourth function, so the driver and the 3-year-old, or hero and anima or animus, he says the first and fourth function are the axis of relating to self, which means that our relationship to the first and fourth function, driver, 3-year-old, hero, anima, or animus, that's us for that's my functions for me. When I'm using them, I'm in relationship to myself, and I'm using them primarily to serve myself or to see things in my own way. Even if other people get the benefit from it, it's more about my relationship and how I understand myself.
Yeah.
The second and third functions, the auxiliary tertiary, or you could call it the co-pilot 10-year-old, or in the model we're talking about today, the parent and child, he calls that the axis of relating to others, meaning that with those two functions, we have a tendency to have them come out most often when we're in relationship to other people, meaning that other people trigger and spark them. So that idea that parental part of us tends to get triggered when we're in relationship to other people explains why for so many people, they're not developing a self-parental relationship with it. It's because it's instinctively being used in relationship to others. So part of the importance of really understanding, this part of who we are is recognizing how often we are just sending that energy out, giving our gifts to other people.
Yeah.
And when we do that, and we're not serving ourselves with it, you can see why so many people develop a less, like it feels like an obligation. To develop this function does not feel fun. Not like the eternal child. The eternal child part of us feels super fun to use and to develop. It's a little anxious sometimes, and it gets a little uncertain of itself, and it seeks approval. But otherwise, it's like it's all play, or it can feel that way. Whereas the co-pilot function feels like it comes with obligation, duty, commitment, right? Stretch. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important, but it's also one of the reasons why I can see why people would develop entire systems to say avoiding it is my personality type.
Absolutely.
Like you can kind of understand why somebody would say that, even if that's not the healthiest way of engaging with it.
I want to get a more tactical or more practical and tangible. Let me just pick a personality type as an example, and this could be a kickoff maybe into actually talking about more types. Mm-hmm. Let me talk about IFJs. So INFJs and ISFJs. So the driver for INFJs and ISFJs is going to either be perspectives or introverted intuition for INFJs, or memory or introverted sensing for ISFJs. But the co-pilot is going to be the same. The auxiliary or co-pilot is going to be the same for both of these personalities. It's going to be extroverted feeling. We call it harmony in the CAR model, in the model that we use. And this is that parental energy you're talking about. And so what you're saying is an ISFJ or INFJ that goes to the world. I mean, it's a really easy one to see because there's already social obligation put on us as soon as we exit our house, as soon as we exit our inner space and we go out into the world. We have to talk to people and do things, right? And if this is parental, there's going to feel like there's a responsibility to the IFJ who feels a sense of, I need to caretake, I need to show up, I need to offer support to create harmony, I need to get needs met. It's my responsibility to do harmony type things when I'm in the world. That's my parental, quote unquote, responsibility. And they listen then to a personality hacker podcast, and Joel and Antonia say, listen, the best thing for you to do is to grow your co-pilot. And I could see an IFJ going, that's insane, because I'm already overburdened by this. Every time I leave my home, I feel assaulted by the responsibilities here. And you want me to do this even more? I'm actually looking for an escape from the tyranny of this function. This feels like it is putting a lot of weight on me, a lot of responsibility. I'm actually looking to get distance from it. And you're telling me that I need to do it more? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make any sense. How am I supposed to do this more? Not all IFJs feel this way, but some IFJs might say, like, I can barely do what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. What are you talking about? How am I supposed to even do that, right? That would be the kind of the question from somebody maybe wired that way.
Well, and I mean, it's not word for word, but I think we've actually received that feedback from IFJ types. And we're like, absolutely, you're nuts. I'm not doing any more of this.
Yeah.
And that makes sense in the context of it being triggered by the outside world, and assuming that when we say develop the co-pilot, we mean just keep using it in service to other people.
Yeah.
And so if that's the natural instinctive use of it, you could see why there would be like a no thank you response.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, not in terms of only using it in behalf of others, which is the instinct, but not what we're talking about. If you start seeing it in terms of using it to self-parent, to serve the self, to have a sense of responsibility to the self, now it changes the dynamic. Now it's no longer go out and serve everybody else and get all of their needs met. Now it's make sure that you are serving yourself, make sure you're getting your needs met, make sure that you are checking in and supporting yourself. What does it look like when you use this function parentally for others? Gives a really good, it gives a good starting point to go, am I doing it healthy to begin with? Am I a healthy parent when I'm parenting others? And number two, if I'm not, what do I need to do to be healthier? And number three, once I bring that relationship to, like, that parental relationship to a healthy space, how do I now do it to myself? Now, how do I self-parent in the healthiest way possible? And when we say phrases like develop the co-pilot, it doesn't sound like that we're saying all of that stuff, but that's basically what we're saying. Like, develop the co-pilot is another way of saying bring this function to a healthy inner parenting space.
Yeah.
And so the best way to see how this could look is actually go through all of the types. Talk about the 8 cognitive functions that live in this parental energy space, and talk about how a person who uses that function can do healthy self-parenting with it.
Yeah. So I already opened up the channel for extroverted feeling harmony for IFJs. So let's start there. What other things do we need to talk about with harmony or extroverted feeling as a parental energy as we kick this off?
Okay. Yeah. So let's start with extroverted feeling or harmony, because like you said, we already hinted at it. Okay, so what is extroverted feeling or harmony? What's the nucleus of this function? Well, the nucleus of the function is to understand connection with other people, or to be in rapport. It's a recognition that no man is an island, basically, and that when a person shows up in a certain state, that's going to have an impact on the people around them. So extroverted feeling or harmony very much has its finger on the pulse of the state that people are in. It's like, is this person in a good space? Are they in a bad space? How do we bring morale up to make sure that everybody's okay? And it's the function that we all rely on in order to be cooperative societies. Like, entire cultures are built on this function because we need to trust each other. We need to trust that we each have each other's best interest at heart. And so if you take all of that concept and go, okay, so how am I parenting other people with it? I'm an IFJ type. When people come and seek help, or if I'm in a mentorship position, or if I find myself in leadership, or if I'm actually parenting my own children, how does that tend to show up? Now, we just talked about the general energy of it, but it can roll out in a million different ways. Extroverted feeling or harmony could say, like in a healthy way, oh, my child needs protection at this time period, and so I'm going to protect them. But later on, their need is preparation. So I'm going to shift how I do things, and I'm going to now prepare them for life. That might be one way of looking at it. But another way is you get in a mode of going, oh no, I need to protect them. And then you never let off the gas on that one. You're just constantly protecting them throughout their life. And now you're becoming smothering, right? So the first thing you have to do is go, what is my tendency when I'm using this function? And what would the most mature version of the function look like? When it comes to this function, you go, okay, so if it's to make sure everybody's okay, to make sure everybody's okay, right? Like I'm ensuring that the equilibrium is good. I'm also asserting certain social values that I believe everybody should be living by in order to keep us all cooperative, and a society and a culture that is, like has a really strong substrate, right? Like a really good substrate of human cooperation and connectedness and trust. If it's my job to do that, what's the healthiest way to do that? Well, there's a lot of different theories on that, but part of it is, you let people learn their own lessons. You don't smother them. Part of the needs that humans have is to learn their own lessons, sometimes the hard way. Sometimes it's doing things that are tough, that hurt, in order to get a better result for the individual on the other side, help them grow up. Another one is helping a person know when they no longer should be relying on others to do things for them. Like the impulse and instinct is to be emotionally supportive. But if you're endlessly emotionally supportive, a person might start to get sort of dependent on that.
Yeah.
In the same way that, I was just watching an advertisement actually on how skin creates its own lubrication until you start training it not to with different, like lotions. And it's like, well, actually, weirdly enough, you might be causing drier skin by using these lotions. And so that means that basically illustrates that anything can get addicted to anything or start to over depend on it.
Yeah.
So healthy extroverted feeling or harmony would also be sensitive to when there's too much dependence happening, like that you've trained them to now use you as opposed to their own resources.
Yes.
And so that would not be healthy either. So the first thing an IFJ has to go is like, what kind of parent am I? Right? Like, am I one that's overdoing it? Am I meeting the person all the way where they're at? Am I creating dependencies on me because I'll get all their needs met? Am I kind of liking that? Is in some way, does that makes me feel like I'm useful? Like it really requires some honest introspection on what style of parent you are. And then when you find yourself diagnosing or sort of outlining for yourself what you think the healthiest parenting style is, now, are you doing all of those things for yourself? Inner parenting would be, I'm in rapport with myself. That means when I'm not doing well, I'm paying attention to that. That's the whole point of rapport. When you're in an energetic rapport with another human being, you are now sensitive to the content that's being sent to you, meaning that if they're not okay, you know they're not okay. Are you in rapport with yourself? Are you keeping your finger on the pulse of if you're okay? Are you making sure that you're establishing healthy boundaries? When a person comes to you and goes, I'm having relationship problems, and you advise them, well, what are your boundaries? And are you making sure you're not being taken advantage of? Are you doing that for yourself? Are you establishing healthy boundaries? Are you doing sufficient self-care? Are you making sure that you have your own best interests at heart and you're representing that? You're not just protecting yourself. You're not just preparing yourself, but you're also promoting yourself, right? You have good things in mind for yourself, and you want to make sure those needs are met as well. So if an IFJ is doing true inner parenting with this function, it's not going to feel like a chore. It's not going to feel like extra duty. It might feel like a commitment, just like all parenting feels like a commitment to the self. It's a commitment to the self to make sure that you are monitoring all of those things that keep you a healthy person, just like you would with a child. And so it won't feel like extra burden. It actually, in some ways, feels like a relief because you're not unresourced now. You're making sure that you're resourced in the same way that you would make sure others are.
These are all good things to lay down tracks for. I think these principles are sound, and we like to talk about it from principles because your life and your personality are unique to you. And so coming from a principle approach, you can apply it in whatever makes sense for you. But let me give you a concrete example also to what Antonia is speaking about. Let's just look at the parental energy for an IFJ with the child of its introverted thinking or accuracies in that 10-year-old or eternal child position. Imagine yourself as an IFJ at a social event. You're going out with some friends and someone's not having a good night, and they keep attempting to tell everybody at the table, everybody's having a fun time talking, and they keep trying to articulate what's going on for them. And everybody just kind of keeps talking over them. And you as an IFJ notice this is happening and you go, wait. Susan here has something to say. I'm sorry, Susan, what did you have to say? And you clear the space and you hold back the space for Susan to tell you, hey, I'm not doing well. Here's the truth of what's going on for me. This is how I'm experiencing this moment or what's going on in my life. If you notice this, you're probably going to create that space for her in an external place. The same thing is going on for you and your own eternal child. Often there's little messages. There's a little voice inside that's trying to give you truths and messages. And the parental part of you might be busy giving and serving to others, kind of like quote unquote at the party. But there's a moment when you just say, wait, that little part of me, excuse me, little self, what truth do you have? Let me clear the space. Let me hold back the parameter here and give you a moment to say the truth that's coming up. I need to hear what you have for me. That's an example of self-parenting, like in a real tangible way, to be able to stop all production for a second, to push everything out and to listen to the still small voice of your inner truth that's coming up. You would do it for a friend, so why won't you do it for yourself is really the question, right? And that's something I think you could meditate on if you're an IFJ is, yeah, I would probably do this for somebody else. So now I need to take that energy I do for somebody else and I need to turn it toward myself. And there's probably a ton of applications, if I'm honest, that I can see where I'm not properly creating the space for the parts of me to be nurtured or brought forward, particularly the eternal child part of you as an IFJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great example. And even in the analogy you just gave, like there might be times when you do clear the space and everybody listens, and there might be times when you take the person aside and there's some discretion in there. Right. And so when you're self-parenting, there's room for discretion. There's room for, communicating to an entire group of people, maybe something everybody needs to hear and know, and it's for everybody's best interest, not just your own.
Yeah.
And there might be times when you need to respectfully withdraw and listen to yourself and honor what you're saying, what yourself is trying to tell you. But regardless, I think that's a fantastic example of that same principle. You do it for somebody else, so why aren't you doing it for yourself? And that will carry through with all of these self-parenting concepts.
So I'd like to stick with the judging functions,
okay.
The decision-making cognitive functions. There's 4 of them. We talked about extroverted, feeling, or harmony. Anything else you want to say about that before we jump to the next one?
Mm-mm.
So let's talk about extroverted thinking or effectiveness, the other extroverted judging function. Now, this is used by all TJs in the Myers-Briggs system, but the ITJs are going to be using this as their co-pilot or parental energy. So as we tune into INTJs or ISTJs, again, they're going to have the same 2 types of drivers as ISFJs or INFJs, but that co-pilot now is going to be different. It's going to be extroverted thinking or effectiveness. And this is all about getting things done, what works, resource management, attuning toward closing loops. We know all the tropes about this energy or this function, but it does a lot. It's really about resource management and getting things accomplished and finished. It does a lot of things. I'm overgeneralizing for this, but let's talk about what would it look like for an ITJ to not have this just focused on the outer world, but also self-parent with it.
Yeah. So if the nucleus of this function is to build something to make progress, and to have sufficient resource management to be able to build towards progress, then you see this with ITJs that they have a tendency to come alive with this function when other people need their help. If they're not that they love group projects, but if a group is relying on them, or if they're at work and it's asked, and usually work requires this part of who we are. So at a business, right? Or in a career, you see a lot of this come out. But oftentimes it's used in the service of other people, either through advice, giving good, solid, resource-based advice, or practical solutions to things. Anything that you're building towards progress means that you're also giving practical steps to get to an outcome that you're seeking.
Yeah.
So it can be practical advice. It could be creating schematics or Gantt charts, or doing project management. There are all sorts of ways that ITJs give this part of themselves to others, quote unquote, parentally. right? It's like, and they feel very responsible doing so, by the way. When an ITJ is in a situation where they feel the full weight and responsibility of this function in service to others, you can see that that they really show up. Now, you can also see examples of ITJs that abandon this responsibility, that don't do it, that are too associated with, say, their introverted feeling or authenticity, eternal child energy. And in those kinds of situations, sometimes they drop the ball. Sometimes they go, "Oh, I just couldn't," or I didn't feel like it, right?
Yeah.
Which is very much a childlike expression of introverted feeling or authenticity.
Yeah.
So doing it wrong would be dropping the ball, not feeling a sense of responsibility, not coming through, not feeling commitment, not making progress in behalf of others, right? Or helping others in this way, in a practical solution sort of way.
Yeah.
But when they do use this function in a healthy way, when it is about facilitating, I mean, I've known so many, particularly ITJs, that love mentoring. They love it. They love helping foster somebody else's talent to see them flourish and, go up the ladder or whatever it is to get what that person is working so hard for, because they admire and respect and enjoy when people work hard to make progress in their lives.
Yeah.
So if you take that whole concept, but you see it only being triggered by others, it feels like more development of it is working harder in behalf of other people. But it's not. When you start to inner parent with it in the healthiest way, well, now you are motivated to get your own projects done. Now you're doing resource management in behalf of yourself, not just in behalf of other people. Now you're looking for projects that are rewarding to you, that you can make progress on, and setting up all of those practical solutions and resource management for your own life.
Yeah.
And so this is, as opposed to like going like, well, everybody else should be doing this thing. You're doing that thing. You're setting up yourself for success. You're setting yourself up for maybe early retirement. You're doing something that means something to you, and watching yourself build success over time and make progress. That's the part of self-parenting that not all ITJs will give themselves permission to do.
Yeah. Candor. I think candor is a key word here. My friend Nia is an INTJ, and recently he was hanging out with us and we were looking at some business stuff. And, I have the kind of eternal child. This part of this effectiveness is my eternal child. I kind of had some eternal child kind of energy. He just looks at me and he gets really candid, and he just tells me this very truthful, candid statement. And it was done actually without any emotion, without any, we're friends, so he's not going to have any heat behind it. But he said it, I was like, he's right. That's truthful. Like, what he just said is it's a candid explanation of where I am in a business front and some of these things that are going on. And it makes me think, this is what I think ITJs do really well. They can parent through candor to say, look, if you keep doing that, you're going to have this result. Like, this is not going to work. Or if you keep doing this, it'll be successful here. But you have to keep doing this action. It's very action-focused candor. And I think if you're looking for an axis point, if you're an ITJ, INTJ, or ISTJ, and you'd like to turn the self-parenting energy, I think one of the axis points is, how can you be candid with yourself? What are you refusing to see the outcome of what you're doing? Because again, that eternal child of introverted feeling or authenticity might have all these hopes and dreams, all this emotion around all these possibilities, but what's really going to happen? What's the truth around it? Like, what is the decisive cut that needs to happen here? And get past all of your fantasy to the true nature of it. And I think ITJs sometimes allow themselves to have fantasies and not actually tell themselves the truth. And so that candor you would share with somebody else, turn it toward your eternal child, turn it toward yourself and say, here's what will happen if we keep going down this road. This is the outcome.
What are the practical steps that I'm not employing in my own life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty direct and it's pretty obvious. It's pretty external. I think this is one thing I appreciate both about IFJs and ITJs. I'm a little envious is it feels like their work is very straightforward and direct. It's extroverted. It's in the organization of the outer world. And of course, it's easy for me to say that because I don't have to go through those two struggles as those types. Mm-hmm. So it's easy for me to sit here and go, wow, you guys are so lucky. That's what you have to work on. I wish it was so easy to do that. Clearly, it's not easy. Clearly, this takes work and effort for all of us. It's just from my perspective, it seems like it's so straightforward.
Yeah.
So I'm overvaluing my own experience, clearly.
And just remember, as we're going through all of this, that there are models for parenting that you can use. It's like, even for extroverted thinking or effectiveness, you can become an overprotective parent, right? Controlling.
Yeah.
You can get really controlling with other people and not like feel like they can't handle it, so you're going to handle it for them.
Yeah.
On the other side, you can also be a bit of like kind of abandon your kid, right? And to go, well, this is good for them. They'll learn their lessons, right?
Yeah.
And that's overly preparation style. But for extroverted thinking or effectiveness, there's still a component where, like, at one point, you need to hand protection over to preparation, and then preparation over to promotion. And you do that for yourself. There are time periods where you might be too hard on yourself. Like, you actually need extroverted thinking or effectiveness to help protect you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you need to maybe set up a fortification or create some protective resource decisions to protect yourself financially, or to protect your boundaries in a work environment so that you're not being exploited, right? You might need to be protecting yourself. In the same time period, like, you might be overly protective of yourself. You might not allow yourself any vulnerability at all. And really, you're in a preparation parent. Like, you need your inner parent to be more focused on skill development, on getting outside your comfort zone, on doing more to build skills that are transferable to all parts of your life. And the same thing, your extroverted thinking or effectiveness might need to be promotional. It might be, it might need to encourage you to go out and to show the world your accomplishments and to put yourself in positions of opportunities. So when you're self-parenting, don't forget that you're going to have a tendency to do one of those three. And if you're only doing one of those three in self-parenting, you've got you're leaving money on the table. There's other parenting that you need to do for the self.
Yeah. So let's talk about the next judging function, cognitive function. Let's pick, well, we just already talked about introverted feeling, authenticity. Let's go there. This is the co-pilot or auxiliary parental energy function of all EFPs in the Myers-Briggs system. So ESFPs or ENFPs are going to both use introverted feeling or authenticity as their co-pilot. Now, this is an introverted judging function. So we just talked about harmony, extroverted feeling, effectiveness, extroverted thinking. This is introverted feeling, right? This is authenticity. And this is pointed inwardly already. So already is this model breaking down, Antonia? How could this be parental in the external world if this is an introverted function? Clearly, it's only for me already, right?
Right.
Question mark, beg the question. Let's answer this.
Okay. So the nucleus of introverted feeling or authenticity is understanding what it means to be uniquely human, right? It's understanding the emotional content of our experiences, meaning that how are things striking me? How do they make me feel? What does this say about who I am as a person? What does this say about my values? Like, how am I going to show up as an authentic expression of who I am?
My motivations and drives and my desires. Why do I do what I do, and what am I driven toward?
Right, exactly. It's looking at things introspectively to understand the self. And there is a lot of opportunity to parent using this function in terms of modeling and inspiration, in terms of communicating personal values. Like, you use this as a parent all the time with our daughter Piper and with Gunnar and Sawyer, your sons, by communicating what you think what is important, like what you think, like values you believe that they should adopt or at least take seriously.
Modeling. I do a lot of modeling, like behavior. Hopefully you'll see what I'm doing and you'll model it and do it for yourself.
That's right. Exactly. Modeling comes in here. Like, I'm going to show you what it looks like to do this thing, to be the kind of person that does this. And hopefully you'll take a cue. There's also inspiration, like understanding that we're motivated through certain emotions and states. And so trying to be inspirational and inspire, like other people to take good action and to do what's in their best interest. And it also communicates to other people the importance of having a relationship with oneself. Like, it's not selfish to have a part of ourselves that centers on the self. We should be taking our sort of emotional thermostat on a regular basis. We should have our finger on the pulse of who we are and how we're showing up, and not just hand ourselves over to other people. So introverted feeling or authenticity, when it's a parental energy, it's communicating to others, like, don't just hand yourself over to everybody else. Like, be your own person, right? Show up authentically, show up honest. You have value in the world. You have a place. So when other people spark this energy for EFPs, they find themselves showing up in an inspirational, modeling way to help other people take right action. but are they doing it for the self? Now, there are unhealthy ways of introverted feeling or authenticity to show up as a parent. If it's overly protective, then it can be a little emotionally coddling. It can communicate to other people or to your actual literal children that every emotional expression is entirely appropriate in any situation, which is actually alienating for the child. If the child doesn't have a sense of having to interface with others or having to meet reality halfway, if the child believes that your authentic expression is the only thing that matters, then that's going to be very alienating because other people they won't necessarily always meet you all the way on your terms. So an introverted feeling or authenticity parent that's a healthy, balanced parent will not just, it won't just ratify every emotion. They'll also train the child to be responsible for their own emotions, to go, okay, so this is the emotional reaction I'm having, and that's valid, but is it the only emotional response I can have in this moment? And do I have to actually meet the world halfway and maybe set that aside for, emotional content to process later in order to get through the situation that I'm currently in? Or is this a moment when I can actually attend to that emotional content? And the answer is, well, it depends, right? And that's some of the discretion of this function, is to go, is this a moment that I need to actually kind of Aikido myself and get to a better space? How do I motivate myself? How do I find motivation inside of myself? These are all the kinds of things that a healthy parent using this function would do, as opposed to a more unhealthy sort of self-gratifying sort of, or maybe even communicating self-sabotage that can happen in an unhealthy parent using this function, is modeling things like self-sabotage or modeling things like, like allowing the emotion to be to suck the energy out of the room, to be the only guiding star in taking actions in life. That would be the unhealthy version. And so if you are getting to a point where you have a healthy relationship to this, and you are parenting in a healthy way, which is understand your emotions, keep your finger on the pulse of it, know who you are, show up honestly and authentically, but don't assume that's the only thing that's important. Recognize that other people are doing the same thing, and you're going to have to figure out how to interface with them. You're going to have to figure out how to motivate yourself when you're not particularly motivated. You're going to have to figure out how to inspire yourself when you're lacking inspiration. You're going to have to figure out how to take unprocessed emotional content and process it so that it's not just hanging there or jerking your chains from the shadows or whatever. Like, there's a lot of different ways that this function can communicate to others a better way of being, which is basically parenting.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the vein of motivation, I think this function really associates itself with the motivational structures of people. Like, it really understands how do people have to feel in order to take action. I think this is the introverted feeling authenticity's realm. There's probably people in your life, if you're listening along and you're an EFP and this is your co-pilot in this parental energy, if one of your friends is depressed and down, maybe they've been working on a project or something they wanted to accomplish, or they went into the world and tried something and they're demoralized, they have a setback, they're unmotivated, they're having some struggle, you would probably come alongside that person and offer guidance, encouragement, support. You try to give them a pep talk and encourage them, don't give up. You can do this. There's all these qualities. Yeah, it's tough right now, but don't forget why you're doing this. The motivation of what caused you to want to do this in the first place. Remember that initial spark? Tune into that. You'd have some encouraging words for them, most likely. This happens all the time for EFPs, right? We have people in our lives. I have ENFP preferences. I have people in my life that need encouragement all the time. Well, self-parenting is taking that same moment. And when you're demoralized, when you're in a low state, when you lost the initial spark that got you on the pathway, to turn towards yourself and go, you know what, we've got this. Just like you would a friend. The encouragement, the support, the raw pep talk. And for some reason, EFPs forget, wait a second, I have this in me. I can just turn it toward the self and be able to get myself out of the situation. And there's a bunch of other things it can do, but I'm just talking about the one access point here. So that's a tangible way to look at it if you have EFP preferences, I think, and you want to start parenting with this toward the self.
Well, alternatively, it's also, do you need a shoulder to cry on?
Yeah.
Introverted feeling or authenticity can understand emotional hangups and the importance of processing through emotions. So if somebody is like, oh man, I'm feeling so demoralized, EFPs can be a shoulder to cry on, to kind of hold space for emotional content that isn't personal to them.
Yeah.
They can allow the person to like go through, like maybe they need to rant and rave, or maybe they need to sob or whatever.
Emotional dialysis. They can provide that for a friend.
Right. You can be there, hang out, right, while the person is going through whatever emotional expression they need to get to the other side. And maybe they'll find their spark on the other side, because the thing that was weighing them down was all this unprocessed emotional content. Well, for EFPs, that self-parenting needs to go that direction too. It's a way to find that original spark, but also do you have unprocessed emotional content that's weighing you down?
Yeah.
And a lot of EFPs do. They have regret, or they have anger, or they have, anxiety, or they have stress, or they have, like sadness and grief. They've got something. We just did a podcast series on emotions that we're avoiding. Most people have unprocessed emotional content, and that includes EFPs, and they might be avoiding it. They might not be doing it because reasons, right? It's not particularly fun for anybody. And so
these emotions have been so useful to get things done or to output. And so you just keep collecting them because you use them to motivate yourself, but then they have trauma or calcified. You're like, well, I'll deal with that later. I got to keep producing in the world. I don't want to slow down and process. So they've been useful at one time, like emotions that have been useful at one time to help you are now calcifying and causing an issue. And so that's where the EFP can self-parent, to go look at that and actually process those and release them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I said reasons, but I mean, you just gave one of the best ones. I was being vague because I know there's a lot of different ways, but I think the ones that you just mentioned, which is using these emotions to get something done, is like a parent serving a child.
Yep.
Because for EFPs, extroverted thinking or effectiveness is the child energy that wants to get things done. So if you are using emotions to get things done, you're a parent serving a child in an inappropriate way. So self-parenting means, okay, I need to get through this unprocessed emotional content, right? I can't keep using it, exploiting it. I need to actually process it through, and I need to figure out who I am on the other side. Maybe I don't even want to be doing the things that I'm doing, like all this, like a jerk in the chain of my emotions to serve this outcome. What if I don't even care about that? What if that's not even honest for me? And so doing self-parenting is getting real with yourself, is getting honest. And then also back to that original model of protection, preparation, and promotion. Sometimes you're overly protective of your own emotional content. You're not allowing yourself to process emotions you need to, because you don't want to have to feel those feelings. You're protecting yourself. But a good parent knows that preparation is just as important. It's the skill development of being willing to sit with these really bad, negative, or maybe just scary or unfamiliar emotions, to process them through and figure out who you are on the other side. Now, the challenge with that is now you have a responsibility and obligation to them, which is one of the reasons why sometimes EFPs avoid this, is once they figure out who they are, they can't unsee it. And now they have a responsibility, duty, and obligation to follow that path. And that's part of growing up. Part of growing up is committing, right? That's the whole thing about what does a parent do? They commit to something that they can't undo, right? Or they can't say no to. And so, self-parenting is bringing on the commitment to be responsible to the self. And then that's also protecting, like not allowing yourself to be emotionally exploited, right? That's a part of it. You're not trying to protect yourself from your own feelings, but you are trying to protect yourself from other people's exploitation. So you will know whether or not other people are doing that to you if you keep your finger on the pulse of how things are impacting you and how they're making you feel. And then also promotion, right? Not just inspiring others, but also being willing to promote yourself in the world. Look for opportunities, inspire others, and so that they can see what you're capable of, right? Not just doing things, whether they call it woodshedding, just doing things in private, but actually bringing your talents and gifts to the world so that they can see it. So healthy self-parenting with this function means doing some of the tough content, right? Some of that tough stuff that makes you a more qualified person in the world, so that you're not just looking for other people to take care of you.
So we've talked about extroverted feeling or harmony. We've talked about extroverted thinking or effectiveness. And now we just talked about introverted feeling or authenticity. These are 3 of the judging cognitive functions. So now let's turn our attention toward the 4th and final judging function, cognitive function, of introverted thinking or accuracy. And this is used by all TPs in the Myers-Briggs system in general, but ETPs are the ones that are going to use this as a co-pilot, auxiliary, parental, energy. So ENTPs and ESTPs have different drivers, but the co-pilot auxiliary parental function is going to be the same. That's introverted thinking, what we've called accuracy. And again, this is an introverted judging function. So it's not applied to the outer world. It's coming into the logic and the thoughts inside the mind and the belief systems that a person carries. This is what this is attended to. And it looks to make decisions based on as much impersonal criteria as possible, disassociated from the self, to look at what are the facts, what is the logic, what does the math say, quote unquote, in the scenario. That's the best decision, is what the math says, right? So this is where this is applied in the world. And now it's also going to show up parentally, externally and internally. Let's talk about the qualities of this function.
Okay. So the nucleus of this function is basically to seek the truth. It's looking for what makes the most rational sense. It's like a critical way of looking at everything. And like you mentioned, it disassociates from self because it doesn't want to bring itself in. It doesn't want to bring its own biases in to corrupt the information or data. If it's problem solving, it wants the best information possible to solve those problems. And the thinking functions, both of them are problem solving functions. Now, because it's introverted, it doesn't have to have it doesn't have to account for itself in its outcome. It's more process oriented than it is outcome oriented. So it's always trying to make sure it has the cleanest thinking it possibly can by updating its systems, updating its thought processes, updating how it sees the world. And it doesn't mind reevaluating, right? Like extroverted thinking or effectiveness doesn't really like having to redo work because it's working with actual materials in the outside world. Introverted thinking is more theoretical, so it doesn't mind redoing work. It'll reevaluate all day long in order to make sure that the process is just right. So how would one use this parentally is a very good question, right? How does one parent with such a rational function, right? That's seeking the truth.
YouTube comments.
Yeah.
They come and tell us on YouTube what they're thinking.
Yeah, actually.
I think that's the attempt. That's the energy trying to be helpful.
That's right. Schooling other people, teaching, educating. That is very much a way that this shows up parentally. And I would say that in the same way that you talked about extroverted feeling or effectiveness having candor.
Extroverted thinking.
Sorry, extroverted thinking or effectiveness, my apologies, has candor. Introverted thinking or accuracy has a sense of transparency. It's willing to share information that maybe other people hide. Or
will weaponize.
What's that?
Or could weaponize.
Like
they're not, I've noticed that accuracy users are not careful with information because they would never use it that way or weaponize it. They're a little more vulnerable than most of us.
Right.
So just say all this truth. It's like, dude, you probably shouldn't say all that to everybody.
Well, I mean, you have effectiveness, so that's probably more obvious to you. But in a parental way, this can be extremely helpful to children.
Yes.
Because a lot of times children are, they're uninformed. Like part of the reason why they make the decisions they do is because people are hiding information from them that might be very helpful because they think the kid isn't ready for it, or that might not be appropriate. Trying to follow social mores or trying to follow the culture. There was a time period where nobody ever talked about sex with children ever, ever, ever. And it was considered like the wrong thing to do. And people made a bunch of really bad decisions as adults because they had no information on their side.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't talk about basic biology. Like girls would start puberty and not understand what was happening to their bodies. So introverted thinking or accuracy is a function that parents or helps other people through educating them, through sharing vital information, by trying to have them have perfect information, if at all possible, so they can make the best decision.
I think another thing it does too is it gives people principle-based thinking. A good parent, like the preparation of it would be giving good principles to base your decisions off of, because you could give somebody advice that is okay in this context as a child, let's say, but as they grow up, what's the principle of why I did this when I was a kid and why I don't do it as an adult? I need to know that. And if I know the principle, I can make good decisions in any context I'm in. It's almost like you've got this ingredient base of decision-making principles you can pull from, and you can have critical thinking for no matter the subject matter you're applying that toward. I think that's where accuracy. I've seen you do that with our daughter. You try to give her a lot of principle-based thinking because you have ENTP preferences.
Yeah. And it also does a similar thing that introverted feeling or authenticity does, which is model. It models how to think.
Yeah.
And so it shares not just the outcome of a thought process, but the process itself. This is how you think about things. And I've told her many times, like, I don't really care. I don't care what you end up believing as an adult. I just want you to be careful about it. Like, I want to know that you put sufficient thought into it, and then I'll honor whatever it is, right? Even if it's different than mine, I'll honor it as long as I know that you're putting your own personal thought into it. So it's modeling thought processes. And so it's there's a lot of ways that it can be quite parental. It helps solve people's problems. It helps put good thinking into problem solving. And it also tries to model honesty with the self, calling oneself out, owning oneself, like owning the things that you need to own as an individual, even if it hurts your ego. And so there's quite a parental energy that comes along with this. If a person's like, well, how would you parent with that? And that's basically how it shows up in parenting. Now, it can also show up poorly in parenting. It can, just like with the other functions, it can overvalue itself. It can think that it can model what it looks like to call everybody else stupid. It can model what it looks like to disregard other people's experience, right? Other people's thinking processes. So it can also be not a great parent, just like all of the functions can show up poorly, right? Over controlling or focused on the wrong things or whatever. And an introverted thinking can model poor parenting by, disregarding other people, if they disagree with you, or saying that there's only one right way of thinking about something. Now, if you take this concept of parenting others, helping them understand what's true for them, helping them understand what makes sense for them, coming to, like better styles of thinking to make better decisions in their lives, well, are you doing that for yourself? Are you bringing that healthy parenting to the self? And one of the best ways that ETPs can do that is by giving themselves permission to disagree with others on fundamental paradigmatic concepts or thoughts. Like it's okay to disagree with the people in your life about like really fundamental things. It's not uncommon for ETPs to grow up in a paradigm in their home and discover that they don't agree with how their parents are seeing things, or maybe entire cultures, right? Like they grow up in a certain cultural paradigm and they disagree with that. And then getting to a point where you go, okay, so what do I think? Am I allowed to think my own thoughts? Am I allowed to believe whatever makes sense to me? And then also to give oneself permission to be transparent, to pursue lines of thinking that other people might tell you you're not allowed to pursue. Like you're not allowed to think those things, or you're not allowed to question those things. You're not allowed to go down and do research around certain topics. But I think the most helpful self-parenting element is encouraging oneself to get rid of biases and ask yourself what you're lying to yourself about. It's really easy to call it out in other people, right? Well, I know you're lying to yourself about this, or you're inconsistent in this thought. It's very difficult to do to the self because there's so many thoughts in there. So you have to get really organized. In order to see how you're lying to yourself, you have to have good systems of thought to observe the incongruities. So are you disciplining your mind? The encouragement is for other people to discipline their minds, discipline their thought processes, be more careful about how they're thinking. Are you disciplining your own mind? And are you committing to that, right? Are you committing to doing like basically thought hygiene on a regular basis, reevaluating what you thought you knew before now that new information has come in? So this is how an ETP self-parents with this function. And one of the things about the function is that you can't, like certain things, once you see them, you can't unsee them. Like you cannot unsee the truth of something. And that all by itself is an impetus to act. As soon as clarity shows up for introverted thinking, it's off to the races. And so when ETPs find themselves like listless or not really having very much motivation in life, or not really understanding what they're doing or why they're doing it, oftentimes it's because they have not done sufficient thought labor on their own processes and made sure that these are like, this is actually what they want in life. This is actually makes sense to them. This is actually this is the paradigm that they align with, or maybe even create their own paradigm, right? Like they don't even align with anybody else's. They just create it for themselves. And they're willing to call themselves on their own shit. So that's how one parents with this. Now, again, there's the protection, preparation, and promotion. And if you have a tendency to be overprotective, well, you might not be willing to listen to other people's opinions enough. Maybe that's the thing you need to be doing. Maybe you need to be protecting against other people's opinions because they're overly influential. Like take, for example, the relationships in your life. If everybody in your life is of a certain political persuasion or they're all part of a certain religion, protecting yourself might be kind of cutting yourself off from that thought source to get enough space so that you can figure out what you think independent of them. So you might have to protect yourself against other people's thoughts. But at a certain point, you have to start reintroducing their thoughts to prepare yourself to be able to hone how your mind is thinking and that it holds up against argument, right? Against other people's criticism. So sometimes you have to protect against, but sometimes you have to stop protecting and you have to start listening to other people and how they're thinking about things and the ideas that they're offering so that you can hone how you're thinking and like having, the iron sharpens iron. And then eventually you get to promotion, which is expressing these things, communicating to other people, being able to share the results of your thought processes that could be very helpful and that other people can see and go, oh, I like how you think. Why don't you come join this opportunity? So when you're doing this, when you're self-parenting with this, remember that you're still going to have a tendency to fall in one of these three buckets and make sure you're doing all three of them.
I think an easy access point, well, maybe not easy, a clear access point. If you're you're watching or listening right now and you are a TP and you're looking for a way to access what we're talking about, to turn this attention more towards self-parenting. One of the things, I made a joke about the YouTube comments. Well, somebody's coming on and quote trolling a TP that's coming on to troll. That's how I would see it. They're coming on to help make distinctions. They're usually trying to help clarify thoughts that are kind of glob together and separate them out and create nice, clean distinctions between thoughts. I've noticed that's the intent. Whether it's, achieved or not is sometimes in question. But I think the energy is attempting to help create those distinctions, because if we can have clear definitions and distinctions, that's good basis for good thinking. Like that's the substrate good thinking can rest upon. So if you're going to self-parent with that as an accuracy co-pilot or parental energy, helping yourself get good, clear distinctions and definitions about what you believe and how you're thinking about things, including frameworks. Like I think Myers-Briggs is a framework. The car model uses a framework. It's organizing thoughts in your mind, right? Collecting these and being able to hang concepts and thoughts on them and create those distinctions and definitions. Now you've got a substrate that it's real. I mean, you can ask yourself now, where am I lying to myself about? Because you have tools to do that because of the discipline of clearly defining and making the clarity. So I think that's like a tangible way. I mean, there's a ton of other things you can do, but that's a tangible way, I think, to turn that parental energy on the self.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best ways to discipline this part. I think a good parent disciplines.
Yeah.
And there's a discipline.
Not punishing, but discipline like in shaping and guiding, right?
Exactly. Discipline coming from the word disciple, right?
Yeah.
Which means to learn and to, I think, right? I'll have to look up the root word of disciple. It's been a while. But effectively to shape, to become like an acolyte for a way of thinking.
Yeah.
And every single one of these functions has a different way of encouraging discipline. And for introverted thinking or accuracy, disciplining the mind means setting up structure inside and having systems, right? Having these, these formulas or these models helps, make sure that you've got clean thinking. So I'm going to propose something. Yeah. I think we're already probably around the hour mark, if not over. So I think we should take this 2-part series and turn it into a 3-part series. What do you think?
Fair enough.
Okay.
So we need to still cover the 4 perceiving cognitive functions.
That's right.
Of introverted sensing memory, introverted intuition perspectives, extroverted intuition exploration, and extroverted sensing sensation, right?
That's right.
So we need to cover those 4 still. And let's stop here and ask you if you have one of these as your copilot, these judging functions, the first ones we talked about today, what's coming up for you? Are you identifying with some of the things we're talking about? Have you seen yourself, the 2 questions on the first episode we asked, now that you've got some more fidelity to this, are you seeing yourself outsourcing that eternal child part of you and wanting something outside of yourself, not your copilot or parent energy, but something outside of yourself? You're hoping can be saved by that. Or Have you noticed where you attune your parental energy? Have you noticed the type of people you tend to lend it toward, or projects? Like where do you focus this in the world if it's externally focused?
And I would say the question for this one, if you have IJ or EP preferences, which are all the types that would have a judging function as their co-pilot or auxiliary, is their parental energy, is how much better off would you be if you turned the superpower that is the function that is auxiliary or co-pilot for you into an inner parent? Like what would that look like if you committed to parenting yourself with this energy? Would you find yourself a lot more self-directed? Would you find yourself to have more agency? I think making sure that you're defining this well, which is not just I have an obligation to do this more. No, I have an obligation to do this in my own best interest more, which is what parents do. Parents do things in their children's best interest. So as you sort of ruminate on this idea, how can you use this parentally in your best interest to shape yourself to become a better version of yourself, which is what parents are trying to do with children.
Which is a fantastic action step. Come over to personalityhacker.com and directly below this episode, let us know what Antonia just asked you. How do you see an opportunity? Maybe how have you used this already in self-parenting? Where's the opportunity for you if you're one of these types to self-parent? Ask a question if you have questions, leave a comment, share your story about what's coming up for you, and maybe give some bullet points or some thoughts around how you might tune into this energy for the self. I think this is a really great launching place for your personal growth, using personality as the lens for it. In fact, I would also, again, encourage the owner's manuals of personality. We have 16 different ones, one for all the 16 personality types. The one that's for you can go into things like creating a flow state in your life, creating an ergonomic life for yourself. We talk about growing the co-pilot and how that looks. There's also elements that, the loops that can happen inside your personality and get you stuck in different places. Grips, you can be gripped by your inferior or 3-year-old function. It can really hijack your experience. So we talk about those elements. It's a good foundation for going into using personality type for personal growth and personal development, whether it's career, relationship, self-identity, or worldview. Those are the areas you can use this in. So I recommend those owner's manuals, and also come over to the site and make your voice heard.
Yeah. And you can subscribe to the podcast with a variety of different platforms. And so if you like this episode, we highly recommend that you subscribe, because the next one's coming out next week.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to know, right? And if you are watching us on YouTube, since we have a video podcast, you can subscribe, and hit the bell to let you know when the new episode comes out. And as Joel mentioned, go pick up a copy of your owner's manual so you can do a deep dive, and you can take this concept of type, this theory of type, and turn it applicable, turn it into actionable wisdom, not just theoretical knowledge.
Yeah. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
We'll talk with you as we conclude this series on the next Personality Hacker podcast.